Hello and welcome to U.S. History 215 Online, and we are on Chapter 13 this week. As you can tell, it is Halloween. I was a middle school teacher for a little while, so I get a little excited. I've got my faux tattoos on, and just so you know, toil and trouble comes from the Shakespearean play, of Macbeth. It's a little bit academic still. This week we are talking about, or in this video we're talking about Chapter 13, the continued move west. I should have dressed up like a cowboy. There is this picture in your book. If you have the new edition, I'm not sure if it's the same picture, but this is supposed to be, the artist John Gass captured the idea of manifest destiny perfectly in this image, showing an angel of the Lord bringing education and commerce west for the benefit of white settlers, while Native Americans fearfully backed away. So you have this picture, and it's really peculiar, and it sounds lovely. It's supposed to be this angel representing manifest destiny, when actually, if you dig deeper into manifest destiny, it is just a way in which U.S. citizens, U.S. government officials really tried to make an excuse for stealing, Native American lands, killing Native Americans. Sure, there were some that made proper treaties, but for the most part, Native Americans did not trust the U.S. or U.S. government because there were a lot of Eurocentric attitudes, thinking that Eurocentrism, we talked about that's one of our words, thinking that Europeans were better so they could do what they wanted. And then what they do, it's called a determinist view, is they have all these facts and they don't quite fit the box, so they just shove them in the box and make them fit anyway. So making it go along with religion makes it a tidy little package, except when you unwrap it and you see the horrors of it. So manifest destiny, what is it? Manifest destiny is mentioned in your first pages, and it's just this, I thought there was a definition. Let's see. Under this banner of manifest destiny, they felt that, they were the right religion. And so God was giving them this land and this country, and taking it away from the Native Americans was okay, because they were the wrong religion. And, you may believe that, but taking something that's not yours is never a good thing or a right thing. And I just want to remind you, the best thing we can do about our country, I'm a huge American patriot. I love America. But the best thing we can do about our country, and that's why we've talked about patriotic history, is to not just look at the good of America, because that's not a full picture. Just like you can't look at all the good things of a person. You have to look at their good, and you have to look at their bad, and you have to look at both of them, so that you can make changes and move forward. So in this instance, we need to look at the bad of our country so that we don't make the same mistakes, and really owning and taking ownership. As Dr. Phil would say, and I love to quote this when I taught high school and middle school, own it. So the opening of the frontier kept alive the democratic promise that poor but free men could make it on their own, although there were costs. Okay, so why were they going west under this banner of God gave us this land, which is not biblical, and they're not the Israelites, and this is not the promised land, and this is not really, they're forcing it into their religion to make it work for them so they can sleep at night. So what are 3 reasons why? They were fleeing religious persecution, many of them. We'll talk about the Mormons. They were going to pursue greater social freedom, and most often they wanted to seek riches. And none of those things, well, okay, maybe religious freedom, really is a biblical reason to move west and take other people's lands. One thing I want to point out, so Europeans move from Europe, okay? They move from Europe because they're fleeing religious persecution. And then they get to the colonies and they set up religious persecution. Again, I remember we've talked before that if you did not go to all 3 services, you could get whipped, and then you could, if it happened several times, then you could actually be stoned or hanged. So then you have this reestablishment again, and you have religious groups moving west to flee religious persecution once again. And this is something that we really need to think about, especially in our day and age with Muslims. Do we really believe in freedom of religion, or do we really need to come to terms with the truth and reality? Do we only believe in freedom of religion if it is the religion that we choose? Because there's a majority, there's a minority religions and that sort of thing. And what's really cool is if you look back in the Muslim history, you hear a lot of lies about the Muslim religion. It's really sad. And I took some amazing courses in grad school, had a fantastic professor. So one thing about the Muslims is they did not want you to convert, everyone to convert wherever that they were going and they were moving, because if you were Muslim, you didn't have to pay taxes. So there were several cities where there were Jews, Christians, and Muslims, and you could choose whatever you wanted, and you could pay a small tax, like a religious tax. But they wanted people of other religions so that they had money and taxes. And if everybody was Muslim, then there would be no tax collected. So you could pay this small tax, and there were several cities where this worked out very, very well. And we don't research those. We don't hear about those. Drama is sensationalized. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so Western conquest and development, you have the mountain men, really interesting, rugged group of explorers. They were definitely trappers. A lot of money came from trapping. You have Kit Carson, some people that you've heard of. Then they talk about Texas. My grandmother was from Texas, and she was a pistol. Okay, now we don't believe in stereotypes as historians. A stereotype is a horrible thing. It hurts people. Okay, so you meet someone, you don't judge them on their stereotype, you get to know them, you speak to them, you converse with them. But my grandmother was very much so the stereotypical Texan. And they were very passionate. And as I'm teaching Kentucky history right now as well, Texans and Kentuckians have a ton in common. So that's really fascinating to me. So as Americans moved to Texas, they brought their cotton gins and their slaves. So they were moving their slaves over there as well. Gotta stop here for a minute. Texas was owned by Mexico. So, it's just really interesting when we're talking about all these border wars and illegal immigrants. When you really get down to the history of Texas, they absolutely treated the Mexicans horrifically, stole their land, killed the Indians, and moved on. So you really need to look into the history before huge judgments and stereotypes are made, because actually Texas was wrongfully obtained. And the alimony is how about the Alamo? The Alamo is a fantastic story, piece of history. I've been to the Alamo. It's very awesome. San Antonio might be one of my favorite cities in the whole world. The River Walk is magical. And it has tons of history. And what's really cool about San Antonio is that I have never seen so many diverse people living in one place and getting along. And that's actually one thing about San Antonio, Texas, that is super, that it is known for, is there's so much diversity, diverse color, diverse religion, diverse beliefs, and yet they are able to come together and really get along well. Okay, so it says, they were, during the decade, about 20,000 Americans streamed in and outnumbered them. Okay, talk about illegal immigrants. Here, the Americans are outnumbering the Mexicans. Can you imagine if that happened today? Could you imagine if that flipped? Okay. Anyway, just amazing when we look back at the history of a place. So 5,000 Mexicans were living there, and these Anglo-Americans were assimilating into Mexican culture. It just, you know, if you read this carefully and you study it and you're curious about it, or you have some passionate thoughts about it, just really just look into it. It's just really fascinating to dig up backgrounds. Okay. In 1829, Mexico abolished slavery. Oh, Mexico abolished slavery before the United States did in 1865. That is fantastic. Also, and the date is slipping me right now, England abolished slavery, but it was after Mexico. Okay, so Mexico abolished slavery earlier than England and the US. Fantastic fact right there. American cotton planters simply ignored the abolishment of slavery, if you can even imagine. So they move into this country that's not theirs in Mexico for Texas, and then they ignore the rules. Oh boy. I'm really feeling the heat on this one. This is just fantastic information. So by 1830, the Mexican government became worried it was losing control of Texas, and for good reason. And so they tried to curtail the immigration. They raised taxes. They built military posts, and the floodgates had opened, and Americans continued to pour in, and they couldn't stop them. Does this sound familiar at all? Does this vaguely sound familiar? Okay, Mexico had other problems between 1829 and 1834. General Santa Anna was seizing power in Mexico City. He was abolishing the Constitution. He was becoming a tyrant, dictator, and then they started cracking down, and he sent 16,000 troops to San Antonio. He wanted to gain control of Texas. Okay, my spider is falling out of my hair. I apologize. Okay, there we go. Ugh, it's just hanging in the balance. And then we have Davy Crockett and 187 Texans, including Western pioneer legends, that were killed during battle. And the Alamony, I keep saying alimony, I'm so sorry. The Alamo is a fantastic historical place to visit. I went there several years ago, and it's much smaller than you would think. It's very, very small, and wow, it's just amazing. And then, of course, Sam Houston came, surprised the Mexican forces, and captured Santa Anna himself while he was napping in his slippers. Gotta love that. Okay, Oregon and the Oregon Trail. Maybe you played that game, that simulation game in elementary school, middle school, high school. Okay, it was inspired. The U.S. government asserted sovereignty over Oregon since maritime merchant Robert Gray's expedition to the region in 1792, and it inspired Jefferson to send Lewis and Clark out there. Okay, so they wanted, you know, more ports, another ocean. They felt it was their destiny to be from sea to sea. Okay. The first people who went out there, only a few American citizens were out there, and they were Protestant missionaries, were as distant as Oregon. New settlements and Indian violence. Indians felt crowded for a good reason, okay? Their entire lifestyle was at stake because Americans went through and killed their buffalo, you know, and that was part of their tradition and their culture, okay, to kind of follow the buffalo herd, but to not overkill it. And there are horrific pictures where people were just killing it for sport, and there were like mountains of dead buffalo that were not being used at all, and that wastefulness. Okay. There also were diseases imported by American settlers in 1847. And then you have this report of there was a doctor that refused to treat Indians. He would only treat white people. And this did provoke some justice by Congress to have more control over Oregon. You have the Mormons we talked about. They were west seeking a haven from religious persecution. Christians did not trust Mormons, just because, 1830, Joseph Smith organizing this new religion.